It's Monday, May 19th, 2025. The Supreme Court punts. Operation Retcon Biden is in full swing, and Hillary Clinton says the quiet part out loud on birth rate and immigration. Next on the AM Update.
I don't know. This is what, 2017, 18?
I knew exactly what that meant. A child knows what that meant.
Didn't get here in the past 100 days. It's the Biden administration and the spending that we have seen over the past 4 years.
Don't be a handmaiden to the patriarchy.
Not only did they bastardize the FISA process and lie to the American public, they withheld and hid documentation and put it in rooms where people weren't supposed to look. We're here now to clean it up.
The U.S. Supreme Court granted a temporary motion late last week to pause deportations under the Alien Enemies Act based on the lack of due process given to illegals. The 7-2 ruling was issued unsigned, but Justices Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas publicly dissented from the majority. The lawsuit was filed by a group of Venezuelans from North Texas who were accused by the government of being gang members and thereby eligible for deportation without due process. The court rejected a motion from the Trump administration to allow them to continue the deportation proceedings and ruled that the government had not given the illegals due process to challenge the deportations. President Trump saying in a post on Truth Social, quote, "The Supreme Court has just ruled that the worst murderers, drug dealers, gang members, and even those who are mentally insane who came to our country illegally are not allowed to be forced out without going through a long, protracted, and expensive legal process, one that will take possibly many years for each person, and that will allow these people to commit many more crimes before they even see the inside of a courthouse." He's right on the money on that. Essentially what the Supreme Court did, they said that the Trump administration can't use the Alien Enemies Act. Yes, in effect, that's what they said, but they're really just punting this back down to the Fifth Circuit, who could very well agree with President Trump. All this is basically less than 2 minutes left in a basketball game. We're trying to draw this process, this lawfare out as much as possible. Shame on the Supreme Court for drawing this out even further. Just another cowardly act from the nation's highest court. Well, Operation Retcon Biden is in full swing. Of course, Jake Tapper on CNN talking about this new book that he's got coming out with a journalist from Axios called Original Sin, about the cover-up of Joe Biden's mental decline. Of course, the irony is that Jake Tapper was a full-throated participant in the cover-up of Joe Biden's mental decline. Well, bada bing, bada boom, we've got that book coming out. Now we just so happened to stumble upon audio of Joe Biden's interview with special counsel Robert Hur from a couple of years ago. Axios just stumbled upon this audio. They obtained it somehow, purporting to show Joe Biden's, again, difficulty remembering names, facts, figures, and dates.
So during this time, we were living in Chambers Road, and there were documents related to the Penn Biden Center or the Biden or the cancer focus shot or your book. Where did you keep papers that related to those things that you were actively working on?
Well, I don't know. This is what, 2017, 18, that area?
Yes, sir.
Remember, in this time frame, my son is either been deployed or is dying.
It was many years before 2017, 2018.
And so it was...
The newly released recordings of Biden having trouble recalling such details while occasionally slurring words and muttering shed light on why the White House refused to release the recordings last year. Audio also validates special counsel Hur's assertion, you'll remember this, that jurors in a trial would likely have viewed Biden as a, quote, sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. So again, Operation Retcon Biden, the media trying to figure out who did this. Wow, we're just now finding out that Joe Biden had mental issues and the White House covered it up. Well, you could have probably done some stories back then. I mean, it's just, you could do entire books every single day on media bias, media manipulation. You could do that every single day. It's not news that the media is crooked. But this level of gaslighting is a new low for the media. And that's why it's gotten so much attention over the past week or so. And then we learned this on Sunday afternoon. Joe Biden, former president, has been diagnosed with prostate cancer. Biden was seen by doctors last week after urinary symptoms and a prostate nodule were found. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer on Friday, with the cancer cells having spread to the bone. Prostate cancers are given a score called a Gleason score that measures on a scale of 1 to 10 how cancerous cells look compared with normal cells. Biden's office says his score was 9, suggesting the cancer is among the most aggressive. Now, you weren't born yesterday, so you might be tempted to think, hey, this seems like very interesting timing given the release of Jake Tapper's book Original Sin later this week. All I have to say to you is what Joe Biden said back in July of 2022.
You know what was happening? You had to put on your windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer, and why can't for the longest time Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation.
It was Joe Biden in July of 2022, and what was characterized at the time as him misspeaking, obviously. Cancer is nothing I'd wish on my worst enemies, and so really feel for the human being that's still there somewhere with Joe Biden. At the same time, though, amidst the backdrop of the massive cover-up of his mental decline and the media's complicity therein, this newest diagnosis raises even more serious questions. One person was killed on Saturday and 4 people were injured when a bomb exploded outside of a fertility clinic in Palm Springs, California, in what local officials called an intentional act of terrorism. The blast may have come from a parked car outside of American Reproductive Centers, according to Mayor Ron DeHart. The person killed may have been the suspected bomber, according to the New York Post, but police only described the individual as a person who was near the vehicle. Investigators declined to publicly identify the deceased at a press conference late Saturday or say if the person was the bomber, but confirmed they were not searching for the bomber and that there was no threat to the public. Journalist Carol Markowitz had this scoop. The suspect in that fertility clinic bombing is Guy Edward Bartkus, a 25-year-old of 29 Palms, California. Carol says he left a rambling message about how he never consented to being born. Again, this is being investigated as an act of terrorism. To Colorado we go, where House Bill 1312 is now law. Governor Jared Polis signed the bill into law without any sort of pomp or circumstance or any sort of ceremony. He just signed it into law during a Friday news dump administratively on Friday. Passed as House Bill 1312, the new law is formally named for Kelly Loving, a dude who thought he was a woman, who was killed in the 2022 mass shooting at Club Q in Colorado Springs. The law expands the state's anti-discrimination laws, which apply to settings like workplaces or schools, to include provisions related to using a person's chosen name and referring to them as how they wish. There were earlier versions of this bill that were incredibly concerning, and the entire bill is concerning, that were nixed in terms of actual family court statutes and things of that nature. Fight 1312 is a group of pastors who have coalesced around this issue and this bill in Colorado. They said in a statement on X late last week, quote, about an hour ago, Jared Polis signed House Bill 1312 into law during the Friday news dump, and now, thanks to a bill so radical Gavin Newsom wouldn't even sign, every Colorado can be Jack Phillips into civil court hell. Jack Phillips, of course, is the cake baker who has been embroiled in LGBTQ rainbow activism lawfare over the better part of the last decade, really over the last decade plus. It's a dark day, Fight 1312 says, and also only the beginning. We told you the days of cowardly Christianity were over, and we meant it. We are hard at work behind the scenes on what is next, and we cannot wait to reveal that soon. But for now, pray and rejoice that the truth someday, Colorado will be reclaimed for Christ. Our work towards that continues. So obviously, a bill that was too radical for even Gavin Newsom to sign in the People's Republic of California is now law in Colorado. Over the weekend, it was reported that former FBI Director James Comey was interviewed by Secret Service over his post that we talked about on Friday morning. He just stumbled upon some seashells by the seashore that spelled out 8647, which is a term of art for saying, let's get rid of President Trump. Here is Donald Trump on Fox News reacting.
He knew exactly what that meant. A child knows what that meant. If you're the FBI director and you don't know what that meant assassination. And it says it loud and clear. Now, he wasn't very competent, but he was competent enough to know what that meant, and he did it for a reason, and he was hit so hard because people like me, and they like what's happening with our country. Our country has become respected again, and all this. And he's calling for the assassination of the president.
Obviously, he apologized and said he doesn't.
Well, he
wasn't
apologized
calling for
because
violence. But
look, he's a very bad.
What do you want to see happen? What do you want to see happen?
I don't want to take a position on it because that's going to be up to Pam and all of the great people. But I will say this: I think it's a terrible thing, and when you add his history to that. If he had a clean history, he doesn't. He's a dirty cop. He's a dirty cop. And if he had a clean history, I could understand if there was a leniency. But I'm going to let them make that decision.
President Trump reacting to former FBI Director James Comey stumbling across those seashells that spelled out a message for the assassination of President Trump. Also, before our break, joke time with the president.
Stronger. To a point where the next one's going to be, you know what, the N-word. You know what the N-word is, right?
Nuclear.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
I figured you'd want to clean that up.
Talking about the threat of a nuclear exchange between India and Pakistan. When we come back, Hillary Clinton is still around, and she's saying the quiet part out loud. Moody's downgrades U.S.'s credit rating. Scott Bessent reacts to that. And an upswing in church attendance amongst the youth in Great Britain? Could it be? Next on the AM Update. That's all coming up next. Uh-oh, the sky is falling. Moody's has cut the U.S.'s credit rating from AAA to AA1. Here's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
Just like Sean Duffy said with our air traffic control system, we didn't get here in the past 100 days. It's the Biden administration and the spending that we have seen over the past 4 years. We inherited 6.7% deficit to GDP, the highest when we weren't in a recession, not in a war, and we are determined to bring the spending down and grow the economy.
Fair enough, but under President Trump's first administration, he added $8 trillion to the nation's debt in his first term. So there's plenty of blame to go around.
No. But let's review. We were in the rescue portion of COVID. The Biden administration was in the recovery portion. And Kristen, it would have been, if not for Senators Manchin and Sinema, who were no longer in the Democratic caucus, it would have been 4 or 5 trillion more.
So that's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. I'm sure as Treasury Secretary, he's kind of in a position where he's talking about some of these organizations like Standard & Poor's or Moody's or things like that. He doesn't want to totally nuke their credibility, which is what I saw a lot of people doing, and I think it's probably warranted because you look at the stock market and it keeps going up and to the right over the past 20 years. And it's only now, within the first 100 days of the second Trump administration, that they're suddenly concerned about the state of the U.S. economy. That doesn't make any sense at all. But again, Scott Bessent there pointing out, you don't just get into let's just take this at face value. You don't just completely nuke your economy over the period of 100 days. That just doesn't, a credit downgrade can't just happen over the period of 100 days. I think that's what he's trying to say. Hillary Clinton, former Democrat presidential candidate, was at this forum for civic life for Newmark over the weekend, actually Sunday, and she had some curious things to say about American women, birth rate, and immigration. In one section of this sit-down interview, you heard that during the top of the show mini montage, she called on Republican women to stop being handmaidens for the patriarchy. She went into more details about what she sees as a threat from people like J.D. Vance, saying that we need to start having more children.
Or funding quality child care. They're cutting Head Start. I mean, you go down the list of all the programs that support child rearing and the care of children and create, some safety net for women who are in the workforce, the formal workforce, as well as, raising children. So this is another performance about concerns they allegedly have for family life. But if you had read the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, despite Trump saying he knew nothing about it, if you had read it, it's all in there. It's all in there. Return to the family, the nuclear family, return to being a Christian nation, return to, producing a lot of children, which is sort of odd because the people who produce the most children in our country are immigrants, and they want to deport them. So none of this adds up. But, one of the reasons why our economy did so much better than comparable advanced economies across the world is because we actually had a replenishment, because we had a lot of immigrants, legally and undocumented, who had a, larger than normal, by American standards, family. So this is just another one of their, make America great again by returning to the lifestyles and the economic arrangements of not just the 1950s. I mean, let's keep going back as far as we can and, see what happens.
So there it is. The reason the United States is economically viable is because we imported a bunch of third worlders, and those third worlders used birthright citizenship to make a lot of babies. Sounds like a great replacement, if you ask me. I mean, that's just so many levels of evil and wicked there. Evil and wicked. We need to replace you. We need to replace you. She talked very, very critically about Project 2025, wanting to return America to being a Christian nation. That's what this is all about. That's what it's all about. Because the dirty little secret that she didn't say there is that the only people who are actually having children at replacement or above replacement rate levels are conservative Christians. That's the whole ball game right there. And that's why we have to import the third world over and over and over again. That is the sound in New York City over the weekend of people fleeing on a pier as a Mexican naval training vessel lost control one way or another. Its masts hit the underside of the Brooklyn Bridge over the East River and was out of control. Now, 2 crew members of that ship sadly died in this incident, but that's not the part of the story that I want to talk about. It's not really much of a deviation from the last story, talking about Hillary Clinton and the Great Replacement. An angle of one of the videos of this incident which happened over the weekend in New York City. Again, this ceremonial Mexican naval training vessel with very high masts. It's like an actual sailing ship, or it's meant to look like that. One of the angles of the videos of this incident. In the background, it is this ceremonial Mexican ship just adorned everywhere with Mexican flags. And it's completely out of control. That's the background. And in the foreground, there are oodles of women with their children, and these women are wearing full Muslim garb, burqas, everything. And they're fleeing from this out-of-control Mexican ship on the East River in New York City. Those who have ears to hear, let them hear. Now here's this story from The Independent. A new report from the Bible Society suggests a resurgence of Christianity in the UK, driven primarily by young adults and particularly young men. Church attendance amongst Gen Z has quadrupled, reversing the trend of declining Christian affiliation. This shift is attributed to several factors, including a change in the perception of Christianity, a search for belonging, and the potential benefits for mental well-being. Young Christians cite a sense of community, personal connection with God, and hope as key aspects of their faith. The report from the Bible Society also notes higher life satisfaction and lower stress levels among churchgoers compared to non-churchgoers. Most recent indicator that not only is this trend happening in the United States, it's happening in the United Kingdom as well. Young people returning to the faith. And now there's this. FBI Director Kash Patel, along with Deputy Director Dan Bongino, sat down for their first joint interview with Fox News' Maria Bartiromo to discuss what they're actually doing at the FBI and to ask for even more patience and assure people they really are trying to accomplish something massive. Listen to this.
Well, Dan, throughout the Russia collusion story and the rest?
Look, I can speak to the folks that were in our seats, our predecessors, and they intentionally failed the American public by putting on the biggest DC deception game we've ever seen. They said the FBI was the most storied institution for law enforcement, and it was, and it will be again very soon. But when the likes of Comey and McCabe and Strzok and company came in here with the James Bakers of the world and intentionally lied to a federal court only to rig a presidential election by lying to the American public and using taxpayer dollars, likely illegally, to fund this entire operation, and then withhold exculpatory information from a federal court that I used to appear before to manhunt terrorists, that's what broke the FBI. And then when they were caught, they lied about it. And you and a few others like Dan and others were brave enough to cover it 6, 7, 8 years ago. And we're still talking about it today because as Congress is working rigorously with us, the Crossfire Hurricane documents are coming fast and hard. And they're being sent there unredacted so we can have full accountability. And that's how you restore what the trust that was lost to the American public when it comes to the FBI.
Yeah, but come on, Director, with all due respect, we've been talking about this for a long time, and I've been demanding accountability for many, many years. One of the, you mentioned Comey, Strzok, and the rest. They've got TV shows. They've got media platforms. They're fine. There's been no accountability.
Well, look, it's a fair criticism, but what I will tell people is we weren't here in the FBI in the last 5 years when we had statute of limitations that were still in play, where we could have investigated criminal conduct. Most of these statute of limitations are 5 years old. And we will investigate criminal conduct where we find a righteous case to do so, and the law and the facts allow us to. But a lot of it we're precluded from. So we'll take the criticism, and it's rightfully so. Like, could we have done more in the past? Sure, people before us could have. But what we can do now is continue to put out the documents and the information that these people withheld from the American public. And I'm just telling you right now, as much as we know about Crossfire Hurricane, he and I just found out more last week. And we're continuing to work with Congress to put those documents out. That's how vindictive and vicious the former leadership structure here was. Not only did they bastardize the FISA process and lie to the American public, they withheld and hid documentation and put it in rooms where people weren't supposed to look. And it's a good thing we're here now to clean it up, and you're about to see a wave of transparency.
As FBI Director Kash Patel saying that a wave of accountability is coming and to be patient. I pray he is correct there, and I really do pray that. And I pray that this is not just all stick, no carrot. And I think we should continue to pray for people like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. Dan Bongino didn't leave a very successful career in the media space just to go tits up, basically, at the FBI. I can't believe that he would do something like that. So I really do believe I'm simultaneously frustrated with the lack of arrests, but also very sympathetic to the position that both of these men are in. And I've been very consistent about the fact that maybe of all the corrupt swamp institutions, the FBI takes the cake every day and twice on Sunday. So they are up against a Leviathan here, and they're asking for patience, and I'm willing to extend that still. And I just hope that we do get results, at least eventually. When we come back, there is apparently a trend amongst new parents, Gen Z mothers in particular, when it comes to how to train their children, particularly their new babies. I think it's worth talking about. We'll talk about it next. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. My wife was telling me about this new trend among Gen Z parents that has to do with how to raise them when they are babies. And to sum it up, it's basically the babies should never cry movement, if you want to call it that. I'm not sure how widespread that is, but to the extent that it is widespread at all, I was listening to her tell me about this, and I thought that needs to be addressed. Now, I am not a parenting guru. I do have 2 children of myself, but they are very young. So you can take this with as big of a grain of salt as you would like. But I was listening to her explain this phenomenon. Essentially this means babies should never cry. It's parents, mothers in particular, who are attempting to make sure, just like it sounds like, their baby is never crying. Because apparently, if they're crying, it means it always means something is wrong, and they're going to be I don't know, the connection, parental relationship connection, anytime a baby is crying is being severed or something like that. It's pretty neurotic in my opinion. And so if a baby starts to cry, immediately boob or bottle or give them whatever they want in order to make them stop crying. I'm just telling you, that is not a good thing. Now, going back to what Hillary Clinton was talking about, I hope and I pray that a lot of millennials and Gen Zers, I hope they start having kids and keep having kids. I think that's a good thing. But the basic idea is that if babies are crying, it means something is wrong. And usually that is the case, but it could mean anything is wrong. They could be hungry. Their butt could itch. They may not like the way that your hat is sitting on your head. It could be anything. That's the only way they know how to communicate. And when it comes to bedtime, crying babies, sometimes it's just a way for them to burn off energy before they go to sleep at night, if they are sleeping through the night. By this logic, however, and again, I'm just addressing this in case it's widespread and you've got a son or daughter-in-law or son-in-law who engages in something that sounds like this. Or maybe you are in these shoes right now. I'm not saying this to diss you. I'm saying this to encourage you. Because by this logic, if your baby ever cries, it means you're a bad parent. And that's just not the case. You're putting way too much pressure on yourself. Actually, elevating yourself, you can't, it's another human being. You can't control them 100%. And number two, this line of thinking will always lead to permissive parenting. When they are a baby, when they are an infant, newborn, what have you, of course they have different needs at different times. But if you take this line of thinking to its logical conclusion that crying is to be avoided at all costs, it always leads to permissive parenting because, as you know, if you've had kids, by the time they reach around 2.5, 3 years old, they figure out what? They figure out how to try to start manipulating mom and dad. And so if this is your outlook, that you are to avoid crying at all costs with your kid, it will lead to permissive parenting because as soon as they figure out that as soon as that sin nature starts to kick in, whenever that is, when they become a toddler, they will figure out that crying can get them whatever they want. Essentially, what you're teaching your kids from the moment they are an infant, where you start engaging in this, don't cry, I'll do whatever you want to get you to stop crying. What you're engaging is a lack of setting boundaries. And I can tell you this with good authority. This is something that I am very confident in. Not as a parenting guru, just as human nature and just understanding psychology at a basic level. If you want to meet miserable kids, they're kids that don't have boundaries. That's what this whole babies should never cry movement is creating. So I just want to say this to encourage you. Crying is okay. Crying is okay. And don't put that pressure on yourself. Again, if you've got a son or daughter, a grandson or granddaughter who are having babies now, you can be a big voice in their life to say, don't put that pressure on yourself. Okay? So again, I don't know how widespread this is, but to the extent that it is, Bella was telling me this is kind of a new thing in the trad wife space, whatever that actually is these days, amongst younger Gen Z and older, younger millennial and older Gen Z mothers right now. Don't put that pressure on yourself. That's all. Kind of a one-off topic on a Monday morning. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.